let's talk about the very first thing that you need to do, which is address your email. First things first, limit who it needs to go to. In my old job, I used to get 400 emails a day. Most of them didn't apply to me, and I just wish that sometimes somebody would have stopped and thought, man, does Adam really need to know this, or am I including him for no reason at all? And so that was the case. So just whenever you're sending an email, especially if it's going to multiple people, think who really needs to know this information. And realize too that there are different levels of who you can send to. The to line is obviously who the thing is addressed to. If you're sending it to people just sort of as a for your information kind of thing, you can include the carbon copy, put them in there so that when they get it, they can say, oh, I'm carbon copied on this. This isn't to me. And so therefore they take it as a more of a just an FYI versus this is something that I need to take action on and really pay attention to. That's the difference between to and carbon copy. BCC stands for blind carbon copy. Every email program does this. Sometimes it doesn't show the BCC and you have to go into your settings and make it. But this is whenever we talked about just a moment ago in the previous video where you have to scroll through like 40 email addresses to get to the message. The BCC is the thing that you should be using for this, because what it does is it drops all your emails in there and it makes them blind so that it still goes to those people, but whenever you get the message or whenever somebody hits reply all, it never cuts and pastes all those messages into the body of all of those email addresses into the body of the text. So it keeps them private, which is a big thing too, especially if, like, say you run a student organization or you're involved in a student organization like Block and Bridle or whatnot, or a fraternity, and you need to send an email to your members. I don't know if y'all do this or not. This is the way to go because it doesn't reveal everybody's email addresses to everybody else. So, and then of course, always watch that reply all. It's always a good time for me when you work in an office, especially when you work in like a university like I do, and there's a lot of times there'll be listservs where it's very easy to accidentally reply to like 400 people, and then somebody says something really terrible about somebody else, and then you read it and you're like, oh, we weren't supposed to read that. And so, of course, that's mortifying for the person that actually does it. So anyway, let's move on. So, more addressing. Use an address book with mail groups and validate often. And what I mean by this is don't ever try to freehand type in your addresses, because a lot of time you'll send them to the wrong person or you can't remember. Most email programs nowadays, I feel like, do this automatically. Like if you write to somebody regularly, take the time to save them into your contacts, and then when you start typing their name, it'll autofill it in, and hopefully get the right one. Cool. Make sure, so this is another one, and this is a lot of, again, this is how to make you not that person in the office. If you're going to forward somebody's email, realize, like, if I write to you and then you want to forward it to somebody else that you need to make sure that I would be okay with that. So if you're ever in doubt, get permission. But you need to realize that when you forward it along, like, you're sharing what was supposed to have been private information. And sometimes this isn't a big deal at all, but you need to stop and think about that. Like, is there anything in that message, way down that would be embarrassing to the original sender? So if nothing else, like, if you really need to get the information to a new person, you can always forward and cut and paste, just the pertinent information as opposed to like the whole thing. Let's see, fill in addresses last to avoid sending an incomplete email by mistake. That's a good one too. Sometimes people accidentally hit send and before the email is complete. So I always put the person's address in last. So, all right, let's move on to subject line. Subject line's a big one. More important than you would think. We already talked about it a little bit in the last video, but think of it like a newspaper headline. It's supposed to, when it shows up in my email inbox and that's like the first thing that I read other than who it's from, it's supposed to tell me a little bit about what goes in that message. So you can think of it as like a newspaper headline. It's supposed to grab your attention. It's supposed to summarize the message in a succinct way. And then it's also supposed to make it easier for people to go back and find information days later. And then just as a matter of fact, like, to make you like that not that guy in the office, if you ever want to pilfer a list of people, like say you're on a list like when you're going to work in teams in this class later on, and there's like 5 of you in the team, and somebody sends out a message to all 5 of you, and it's got the subject line, meeting for November the 15th or whatever. And you want to not have to go through all the process of typing in those addresses again, and so you just hit reply all. That's okay, but you just need to go back and change the subject if it's a different topic. Like if you're going to tell them about, man, that Adam, he's crazy, you should go back and change the subject so that the subject matches the content. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So let's rate these subject lines. This is the part where we're moderately interactive in our video. Subject, important, rate immediately, with 2 question marks for some reason. How's that one? I hope you said really bad, because what does that even mean? It also sounds like it's going to contain a virus. Subject, meeting. Well, if you work in an office, you go to like 15 of those a week, so that'll be hard to tell apart. Which meeting is it? I don't know. Subject, follow-up about meeting. Well, the meeting's already happened. I went to 15 of them last week. Which one are we following up about? I don't know. Number 4, announcement. I feel like this could be the subject line for every email, because as in every email, like an announcement of something that's happening? No. So number 5 is our winner. Do we need a larger room for social meeting on May 14th? That tells you like specifically which meeting it is and when it is and what the topic of the email is about. Do we need a larger room? Excellent. Hopefully you all picked number 5. Good job. Those purple crayons are freaking me out. All right, message text. Like now we're getting into the actual body of the message. In general, emails are really short. They're supposed to focus around one topic, or one main point. If you ever have, sometimes, really long emails are necessary, but in that case, it may make more sense to write a memo, believe it or not. If you're writing some what would have been like a 5-page email, you need to stop yourself and ask yourself, do I really need to commit all of this to writing? Most emails are meant to be quick and to the point. As a matter of construction of the message itself, you want to use short sentences and break into paragraphs. So like, I don't know if you've ever noticed the difference between paragraph size in in an essay versus in a newspaper. Newspapers are well, let me back up. Essay paragraphs, they're meant to be read. You know that you're sitting down to read an essay and you're sort of committing to learning about the topic. And so sometimes the paragraphs will be half a page. They'll be 2 to 250 words. In a newspaper, conversely, they realize that people usually read the paper while they're drinking coffee or on the train in the morning or whatnot. And so the average paragraph in a newspaper is between like 35 and 40 words. So you break them into tiny little bite-sized chunks essentially. And you should pretty much do the same thing for email. You're better to have more paragraphs than one enormous paragraph, because it makes it easier to digest. Especially when you're scrolling on your mobile phone, if you're on like your iPhone or whatnot and you got one huge block of text, it's hard to figure out where you are if you have to look away from it for a moment, such as when you're crossing a crosswalk. Do not text while you're crossing your crosswalk. Irritates me. And then if you want a specific response, if you want a call to action, if you want them to write you back, or you want them to book the room, or you want them to, get their paperwork in on time so that we don't fail our group project, you just need to say that somewhere in the email. Good? All right, let's move on. More message text. Write in standardized professional English with capitalization and correct spelling. The funny part of this is that before I came back and reviewed this, they had capitalized capitalization, and that would be wrong. But what they're saying is don't try to impress. You don't need to use like a lot of jargon. Just write in standard, professional English, which would, when we say professional English, we just mean like the words that you choose. Just, keep them professional. Avoid text speak, such as see you later. I feel like nobody uses that anymore. Like back in the day when if you wanted to get to T, you had to press the 8 key like 5 times to get to T, because it had to cycle through QRS. Anyway, these are 90s kid problems. Anyway, don't type in all caps like you're yelling. This is how my mom types to me all the time. I'm like, stop yelling at me. She's like, I'm not yelling. Anyway, avoid the triple exclamation point. You're not a Valley girl. Nothing is that exciting. In fact, I would say you get 1 exclamation point per email. and that's it. You better use it in the right place. No more. Anyway, if you're a boy, you get less. I don't know why there's a gender divide there, but there is. So no exclamation points for you unless something is really, really exciting. Avoid using the words urgent and important, especially if you're thinking that it's urgent and important to you. Again, we could go back to thinking about our audience. Would the audience also find it urgent and important, or would they just be annoyed that you said it was urgent and then they read it and it wasn't actually that urgent because it's really your problem? So you can use asterisks to highlight text if you must, or nowadays we have HTML and you can just highlight it with actual color. So you could do that. And then always proofread and spell check. I read my emails 3 times before I send them, and it keeps me from being embarrassed. Great, super fantastic. Quote back selectively when replying to long messages, okay? What I mean by this is, again, back to our example of if I write you a really long email with 3 or 4 different things that I want you to respond to, and then you write, yes, I agree, that doesn't, tell me anything. And so, maybe the best thing to do if it was a long and complicated email is you can cut and paste, or say, yes, I agree with that we should move the social meeting to room number 440 because it's larger than where we usually hold it. You see what I'm saying? Also avoid fisking, which is what we call replying line by line in an argumentative manner. So if somebody writes you and they've made 5 points about, why you're a terrible person, and then you write back and you say, no, I'm not because of this. No, I'm not because of this. It comes across really, really argumentative. It's better just to summarize, as we said above here. And I didn't believe that fisting was a real word, and so I looked it up, and I went to a really, credible source, which is Urban Dictionary, and found that it is a word derived from articles written by Robert Fisk that were easily refuted and refers to a point-by-point debunking of lies and or idiocies. So there you have it, folks. All right. What we're going to do, since I got on a bit of a roll and recorded all 25 minutes of lecture, is we're going to have a little musical interlude with Toots and the Mytals, and then whenever I upload this as one video, I'm going to post it on the Scholar as 2 different videos so that you don't have to watch more than 10 minutes of video at any given time, even though they're the same video. I know, my mind's blown too. All right, here they are, Toots and the Mytals. For URLs, use tinyURL to shorten the link. Sometimes you put, people cut and paste links in and they're 3 lines long because it's got all the, the hypertext markup language in it. And so you can use this free service, tinyURL, if you want to shorten it, or you can just make an actual link. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. We're going to dive into the frighteningness, which is my email. So let's say we wanted to send somebody this link. So we could copy it. We could go over here. We could start a new message, and you could say, here is a link to a word on Urban Dictionary. Okay, all right, this is amazing. And you could just highlight link. You could right click on it, go to link, and then cut and paste your link in there. And now there it is. Here's a link to a word on Urban Dictionary. Boom. I just changes everything, doesn't it? All right, let's go back. That's how you make links, children. It actually works very similar on Outlook. They just use more ridiculous language. Identify yourself clearly whenever you write to cold contacts. A cold contact is somebody that does not know you or know of you in any particular way. If you write to me, it's not always necessary to say, hi, my name is, Johnny, and I'm in your class, because if you include in the subject line, questions about email lesson in AEE 3624, I'll probably put 2 and 2 together. But if you're writing somebody that, that has no idea, like for example, I'm going to give a shout out to Mackenzie Moore in this class, who I did not know from anybody before the class started, was very nice and wrote and said, hello, I'm Mackenzie Moore, and then explained that I'm trying to, switch into your class, blah, blah, blah. And so it kind of gave me some context for her. Never mind that I thought she was a completely different person. So other things to do with messages is respond promptly, and promptly we mean 24 to 48 hours. Most, if it's during the weekday, most people check their email every day. You're sitting in front of your computer pretty often. If you can't reply to me within those 24 to 48 hours, I start to think you're ignoring me, and that becomes very frustrating. And so if you are really busy, so some days I spend all days in meetings and I don't actually get to be in front of my computer, and so a very courteous thing to do is to write back in the interim and say, I've been really busy, apologize I can't address your point right now, but I'm going to write back to you by Friday. And then they know that you're just busy and you're not ignoring them, and that's a really good thing that you can do. People will love you for that, in fact. Let's talk about attachments. Use attachments sparingly. Nowadays it's a little bit like email's a little bit better, internet's a little bit faster. You can use attachments more and more, unless they're pictures of cats, but just don't. Other things that you want to do is post your attachment first, like go ahead and drag it, drop it in there. That way you don't write it and then say, oh, my email is great, and then send it and then be like, crap, I forgot to include the attachment, because everybody's done that at least once, and it always makes you feel really stupid. We have to write, oops, here's the attachment. Sometimes, rather than including a whole document, it's just better to drag, or cut and paste like only the pertinent parts of that document into the text of the email. That makes it a little easier, because then the person doesn't have to go and read through that whole document to find the one thing that you wanted to show them. Use URL links as instead, especially this is really handy within VT emails, Virginia Tech's email system, which is probably the worst email system I've ever worked in. You only get like so many megs that you can send, and so what a lot of times I'll do is I'll put something in a Dropbox that's public and then send them the link to the Dropbox so that they can get it and download it. Especially in the last point, like recipients who do not know you may be reluctant to open attachments is because they could be viruses. I don't know if you're like back in the day, children, they used to send viruses and emails, and then people, with the notable exception of grandparents, realized that you shouldn't open crap in your email, and so they've largely stopped doing that in terms of viruses, but it does still happen sometimes. So all right, now let's talk about your signature line. Signature line is more or less what I just showed you a moment ago whenever I made an email. It identifies you. I am D. Adam Klutzer. And by the way, if you've ever wondered why I do D, it's because there is another Adam Klutzer out there in the world that also is in academia and publishes. And so we got to be clear that we don't look like we wrote the same things. So use your name, your title if you work within an organization, the organization's name itself, your email address, especially on listservs, because it may not, your email address may not show up. It may just come from like Cal grad students at VT listservs, and then so I'm in there somewhere, but you don't know how to reply to me. So it's good to, if I send an email out to a listserv and said, reply to me, and then they couldn't, so go ahead and have your email address listed. It seems redundant to list your email address in an email, because you would think that if they received it, you would be able to reply, but that's not always the case. If you have a website or if you have a phone number, go ahead and list that too. It's a very professional thing to do. What about other things in the signature line? I would say keep it short. Very few people actually are inspired by fun little quotes at the bottom of your email. You may be, and that makes, whatever, that's great. But in general, don't. It's not that it makes you look unprofessional. It's just that I feel like Robert Frost quotes in an email, just they don't move me. So, and then sometimes like your business will require you to put, this, email and all emails to this address are subject to Florida sunshine laws or, public record searches or whatever the case is. If you got to include that legalistic stuff, then go ahead and put it in there. But I would only put it in there if your company requires it. It doesn't make anybody think you're important. Avoid V cards, because some readers treat them as attachments. They do actually come as attachments, but also who uses a V card? It's not 1999 anymore. All right, let's move on to style. I don't know why I said that really excited. And this is just a matter of having like a style in writing emails. Don't overuse the high priority option. This is the one that switches it to like double exclamation points, because again, more often than not, it's your problem and not the audience's part of the reader's problem. So if it is the reader's problem, and it is absolutely necessary that they get the email quickly and that they call attention to it, then by all means do the high priority, but just use it sparingly is what I'm getting at. And then obviously if it's a real emergency, you should just call that person. Avoid delivery and read receipts. I don't know if you all know what those are. It's this thing that you can do in sort of closed systems. So if you're on Microsoft Outlook and you work for Virginia Tech, you can usually request a read receipt or a delivery receipt. So whenever somebody opens that message, it will send you a receipt and say, so-and-so has read this message. My old secretary, Joan, used to do that, and it used to make me really, really angry. And I was like, Joan, you do not need to know when I read your messages. It's just like a weird invasive thing. So don't ask to recall a message. This again is only one of those things that you can do on like a closed system where if you write something and it's really terrible, really embarrassing, perhaps you hit reply all. There is a feature where you can recall it, but 90% of the time it doesn't work, and then it just looks like if I see a message in my inbox and it says recalled this message, it makes me want to read that message more because I'm like, what did that person say? A long time ago, before they got wise, every time somebody got fired in extension, they would fire off this terrible email that listed like everything that was ever done wrong to them in their office, and that is extraordinarily unprofessional. Also extraordinarily unprofessional is how we would gather around the computer to read it every time it happened. And so they would always try to recall it because they'd have second thoughts about it, and it never worked. And again, don't copy a message or an attachment without permission. A lot of times they are sent to you as it's private correspondence by and large. So just be careful who you share it with. All right. This one is more about so email can be very it's a really quick form of communication, and what it does sometimes is it makes it really easy for you to fire back at somebody that's been made you angry in some way. And so this for you is just a matter of how to be a professional. So if somebody sends you a message, and believe me, I've got them, where it makes you angry and it makes you want to reply back and call them names, it's a good idea to wait 24 hours to send it back. You may not be as angry, the next day. It may also be good to write it out, but then not send it. Maybe you want to write it out, sit on it for 24 hours. Then I've done this before, and then you come back a day later and you're like, oh, I'm not really that angry about it anymore. And then you kind of tone down your language. And sometimes email is never a good way to clear the air. You're never gonna show somebody, bring them around to your way of thinking in an email. So a lot of times it's just really good to just call the person. If you're getting into a heated debate or argument or whatnot via email. Let's talk about this too. One of the things that you may not realize is that especially if you work for a company, or even here at Virginia Tech, your tech email is not yours, especially if you get a paycheck, especially if you work here. In general, they don't care about you if you're a student, but if you work here, that email address and everything that's ever been sent to it or from it belongs to the university. And so in the event that you ever get in trouble with anything, or they ever fire you or something, they, you don't have access to that anymore, and they can take it and read all of your email addresses. They can, if there's ever any kind of infraction, if you're ever reported for anything, God forbid, that email isn't yours. You can go into it. So what I'm saying, or they can go into it and read all of your private information. So what I'm saying is that it's not private, and that you should treat all email as though it's sort of public, and that it can never be erased, and that sometimes it's best and shows a lot of discretion if you don't commit things to email. So there you go. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about managing email, especially if you work here at Virginia Tech, because they only give you 250 megabytes of email space, which is it's 10 floppy disks or something. I don't even know. But if you're on Google, you get a terabyte of email. I don't know, but we get like a floppy disk. I don't understand. So, one thing that you may need to work on is how you archive it, and you can make actual, within Outlook or within Mail, you can make little folders and drag things over to them. I actually make a folder for my classes every year. I'll go back and I'll pull every email that any one of you actually sent me. I'll drag it over, save it on my hard drive under like AE 3624 fall 2014. And then if I ever need to refer to it for any reason, I can do that. And just, like save these things for rainy days or slow days at work. And then some people require that email be backed up, especially if you work in the government, especially if you work in the IRS. I don't know if any of you follow the news. And so, they may require that you back it up periodically so that it doesn't become lost, because again, it is a record of all communication within the business, and they may want to get at it sometime. Printing email, ? The answer to that is no. Don't print emails. It makes you look old. I would say, like, there's no, like, again, Secretary Joan, who was 64 years old when she retired, printed every email she ever got, put it in a binder, kept it behind her desk, and I thought that was the most wasteful, ridiculous thing you could ever imagine, but it worked for her, and I didn't want to make her change. So, don't print email. All right, moving on. Managing email. Declare email bankruptcy. This is, say you've been traveling for 2 weeks, going to different conferences. Maybe, well, you guys do cooler things than I do, so maybe you've like hiked the AT for a month or something, and you come back and you realize that you're just woefully behind. Do like a triage sort of thing, go through, figure out who's written you, write to them and say that you're working on it and that you'll reply to them in time. If you do reply to them, apologize when it's late. Just as a matter of, again, email bankruptcy, just delete all your old messages from your inbox or save them, and then check your inboxes daily. This slide wasn't real important. Okay, use separate email channels for separate communities. This you may not need to get this broken out. I think it's always good to have a professional email address that you use for, say, job hunting. So I have one that's like, it's like adam.klutzer at like iCloud.com or something, and I only use that for job hunting, and that way I never miss an email, like it doesn't get lost someplace. I have another email address that I mainly use for whenever I have to sign up for stuff online and I know that they're going to send me spam, and so that's really helpful because I don't have to weed through spam most of the time. And then I just have like my regular run-of-the-mill Gmail account that everybody writes at me at. And so it's never a bad idea to have those separated out to help you, keep different parts of your life separated. Struggle blast today. All right, there's the references. That's a lot of references. Any questions or comments? Great. Final word about emails. Again, this is just this lesson was just meant to give you some do's and don'ts. Great. Let me show you just for a moment here what you're going to actually be doing with the assignment, since we always seem to end on that. I hope that you all are impressed with my amazing directory and subdirectory organization for this class. I know that I always am. Anyway, here's your assignment that you're going to do for this class. Basically, you're going to rewrite 3 emails. So we've got email 1 here, email 2, email 3. All of these emails are missing something, or they're not formal enough, or the subject line is terrible. Hint, hint, here on email number 3, proposal. And so what you're going to do is you are going to pull all of these out, rewrite all of them. You can add information if you'd like to make it more complete, such as like where the meeting might be held or what kind of things we're going to discuss. Whatever details you need to make up, please do so. And then even though it says that you need to submit it on Scholar here, I think what'll actually make it more real life is if you actually just email it to one of it's either Antonio or myself. So we'll tell you which one when we come to this point. It really depends on which one of us wants to grade it. But that's pretty straightforward. There's some helpful hints for emails that we put up under resources. just kind of a written summary of these videos. So be sure to take a look at that if you'd like. And then over here we have the reading that we've been working on for this entire unit so far, Business Communication by Rick Tailg. And so you can refer back to it if necessary. Also under supplementary reading is this research report by the Radicati group. It sounds like an Italian, ancient sect like the Illuminati, the Radicati. But rather than trying to control the world, they just do research on email. I have an active imagination. That's what I'm saying. Anyhow, this is kind of interesting. This is, the projection by 2017. Email will increase to 206 billion, whatever. So that's your homework. That's your reading. That's your supplementary materials. I think that's it for this lesson. Hopefully you can go forth and send emails in a more confident manner. Hopefully you've taken away some tidbits of information that will prevent you from being that guy at the office. Great, good job. If you have any questions, we'll see you in class. Save them for us. Always love to talk to you about your questions in class.